Late at night, I received a text message. "Sweetheart, we need to discuss the trip. We've decided to delay it until next year." My heart sank as I read the message. We'd been organizing this family vacation for months, our first in years. I had adjusted my work commitments, budgeted meticulously, and counted down the days eagerly, much like a child awaiting Christmas. I immediately called my mom, and she sighed, answering, "Alyssa, I know you're let down, but it's just a financial issue right now. We can't swing it." I swallowed hard, trying to process it. I understood financial constraints. I really did. I had been picking up extra shifts at the café to contribute to the trip, even volunteering to pay for my own flight. Yet, something in her tone, as if the decision was final and my opinions didn't matter, felt like a harsh rejection. I took a deep breath and suggested, "If it's about finances, perhaps we could find a more affordable hotel or shorten the duration." She hesitated, but I detected it. "Alyssa," she said softly, "it's simply not the right moment. We'll make it happen next year, I promise." A promise. One I should have been wary of believing. 2 days later, during a lunch break, I was scrolling through Facebook when my heart plummeted. There was a photograph of my parents on a beach, sun-kissed and holding drinks, the ocean gleaming in the background. My heart thundered in my chest as I continued scrolling through more snapshots. My brother Jake with his girlfriend on a boat, my parents enjoying a seafood feast, grinning over plates of lobster. Then the caption that chilled me to the bone. "Family time is priceless." Family time, except I wasn't included, even though they claimed the trip was postponed. I locked my phone, feeling frozen at the cafe counter, my thoughts spinning. I wanted to rationalize it. Perhaps there was a last-minute work thing or someone had gifted them the vacation. Deep down, though, I knew the truth. They hadn't postponed the trip. They decided I wasn't part of it. That evening, I didn't call my mom or react to the post, instead observing silently as more photos emerged over the following days. Snorkeling adventures, beach bonfires, unforgettable moments made without me. As I glared at each image, a realization dawned. This wasn't just about the vacation. It was about all the times I'd been an afterthought. Birthdays forgotten, holidays where my gifts were an afterthought while Jake received exactly what he desired. All the times I made sacrifices and received none in return. I clenched my jaw, taking a steadying breath. They presumed I'd be too hurt to confront them, that I'd let it slide, but this time was different. I was finished being the forgotten one. They didn't know I'd seen the photos, so when they returned a week later, I was waiting. As the taxi pulled into the driveway, I watched from the window while my parents and Jake unloaded their luggage, appearing tired yet content from their purported, postponed vacation. I steeled myself to remain calm. They were unaware I had discovered the photos. The front door opened, and my mom was the first to see me. "Alyssa," she greeted me, an overly cheerful tone in her voice. "Oh, sweetheart, I missed you. How have you been?" I crossed my arms, replying succinctly, "Busy." My dad entered, setting his bags down. "That's good. How's work been?" I released a brief, scornful laugh. Work was all I'd done, more shifts and scrolling through their pictures, pretending their betrayal didn't sting. Jake stretched and yawned, remarking, "Traveling takes a lot out of you." He looked at me with a smug expression. "Hope you managed everything while we were away." My gaze snapped to his, while we were gone, as if it were normal, as if nothing had happened, as if I hadn't replayed their betrayal in my mind repeatedly over the past week. I inhaled deeply. Enough pretending. I turned to my mom, my voice eerily calm. "So, how was the trip?" She hesitated. "Oh, well, just needed a quick getaway. Nothing extravagant." Liar. I took out my phone, unlocking it and showing them the screen. The photo album, the beach selfie, the boat ride, the elaborate dinner, and the caption that made my stomach churn once more. "Family time is priceless." I tilted my head. "Looks quite special to me." The silence was palpable, almost suffocating, until my mom let out a nervous chuckle. "Alyssa, I don't." My voice, icy and firm, interjected, "Just don't." My dad mustered a cough. "Sweetheart, it wasn't." "Stop," I interrupted, my voice rising. "Just tell me the truth. You never postponed the trip. You merely didn't want me there. The fleeting guilt that crossed my mom's face was quickly hidden behind a feeble excuse. It wasn't what you think, honey. We just assumed. Assumed I wouldn't notice? I snapped back. That I wouldn't see the photos or be naive enough to believe your lie? Jake groaned, rolling his eyes. Oh my God, Alyssa. Are you seriously blowing this out of proportion? It was just a trip. Just a trip, I repeated, each word a painful slap. A trip I organized, saved for, and anticipated being part of. Shaking my head, I rebuked. You could have been honest, yet you chose to lie, making me feel insignificant. Jake scoffed, calling me dramatic, to which I replied with a bitter laugh. No, Jake, I'm just finally being truthful. My mom reached out, Alyssa, please, but I withdrew. Not this time. They needed to understand this wasn't solely about the trip, but about every instance I felt disregarded. Every holiday where Jake's desires took precedence, while I received whatever was convenient. Each time I prioritized them unknowingly unnoticed. With a trembling voice, I admitted, I thought my hard work and sacrifices would finally make me enough for you, but I never was I? Silence ensued until my mom softly denied loving Jake more, to which I replied with a sardonic smile, perhaps not, but it certainly feels that way. Another silence, confirming my thoughts, caused me to exhale sharply. Got it. Without another word, I picked up my purse and headed to the door. Alyssa, where are you going? My dad called. Somewhere I'm appreciated. I replied without a backward glance. Leaving was my first act of self-prioritization. For days, my phone buzzed incessantly with their messages. However, I chose not to mend things. This time, they needed to address the mess without me. I ignored their calls and didn't reply to messages, embracing the newfound freedom in silence. Though initially strange, as ignoring them felt wrong, guilt whispered like an old habit, urging me to relent. Yet, memories of being deceived with lies and social media posts reaffirmed my decision, leading to a liberating silence. By the fifth day, their messages shifted from firm and dismissive attempts to control the narrative to apologetic. Mom. Alyssa, we must discuss this. You're overreacting. Dad. Ignoring us won't alter reality. Call your mother. Jake. Seriously, Alyssa, let it go. Stop acting like a child. Their predictability assured me they weren't seeking reconciliation, only comfort from their own discomfort. But when I remained unresponsive, the tone transitioned. Mom. Sweetheart, we miss you. Hurting you was never our intention. Dad. We mishandled the situation. Let's talk. But the one that nearly shattered my resolve was from Mom. Alyssa, I feel awful. I can't sleep knowing you're upset with us. I hesitated but questioned if they would have confessed without the photo evidence. The unsettling answer kept my resolve intact, so I locked my phone, maintaining the silence. As days passed, I realized they missed my role, not me, the fixer, the peacekeeper, the accommodating afterthought. My refusal left them perplexed. A week post their return, I took an unprecedented step. Booking a quiet weekend in the mountains alone. I packed, took my keys, and left without informing anyone. For the first time, I wasn't seeking permission or waiting to be included. I was living solely for myself, and it felt incredible. By the time I returned, my phone was filled with missed calls and texts, but I chose not to respond immediately. I wasn't ready yet. This was the first time I prioritized myself, and I wanted to savor it a bit longer. They weren't accustomed to me ignoring them, so when my silence extended beyond their expectations, they appeared at my doorstep. I anticipated this moment the instant I disregarded their calls, their messages, their guilt trips. I knew my parents wouldn't simply let it go. On that Saturday afternoon, when I heard the knock on my door, I wasn't taken aback. I set my coffee down, took a deep breath. My hands were steady, my heart calm. I was prepared. Opening the door, I found my mom and dad on the porch, looking different, not angry or smug, but anxious. Alyssa, my mom began softly, tucking her purse under her arm. Can we come in? Leaning against the doorframe, I responded evenly, depends. Are you here to genuinely listen, or just to tell me why I'm wrong for being upset? My dad sighed. We're here to talk, really talk. I scrutinized their faces. They weren't demanding entry or dismissing my feelings, as they had done in their messages. They were asking, that was new. I stepped back. Fine, come in. Leading them into the living room. The air felt laden with unsaid words. My mom settled on the couch, hands folded in her lap, while my dad remained standing, uncertain if he belonged. I sat opposite them, arms crossed, waiting. It was my mom who spoke first. I don't know where to start. The truth is a good place, I replied flatly. She flinched. My dad exhaled through his nose. We messed up. I blinked, not expecting him to admit that. My mom looked down at her hands. Alyssa, when we said the trip was postponed, it was a lie. No excuses, no beating around the bush, just the truth. I swallowed, my throat constricted. Why? She hesitated, then finally confessed. We thought it would be easier. Easier, just as she had texted me. I clenched my jaw. Easier for who? Silence. For you? I pressed. For Jake. I let out a bitter laugh, because it certainly wasn't easier for me. My dad ran a hand over his face. We didn't think it would hurt you this much. I scoffed. You didn't think at all. My mom's voice cracked. We thought you'd understand. Understand, the word they'd used in their messages. The word that was meaningless to me. Leaning forward, I demanded, tell me the truth. If I hadn't seen those pictures, would you have ever told me? Their silence was my answer. I swallowed the lump in my throat, forcing my voice steady. Do you have any idea what it felt like, to see you all having fun without me, to know that I was never even considered? My mom's eyes shimmered with guilt. Alyssa, we love you. I shook my head. You don't treat people you love that way. My dad sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. We failed you, sweetheart. We should have been honest. I stared at him, then at my mom. Why are you really here? I asked. To apologize or to make yourselves feel better? They hesitated. Then my mom said, both. At least that was honest. We sat in silence for a long time. Finally, my mom spoke. I don't know how to fix this. I exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of all the years of being second place, realizing something. I didn't need them to fix it. I just needed them to understand. It would never be the same. I don't know either, I admitted, but I do know this. I'm not going to be the one to fix it for you. My dad nodded slowly with understanding. My mom wiped at her eyes. What do we do now? I met her gaze. That's up to you. They thought an apology would suffice, but apologies don't erase years of being an afterthought. This time, they needed to prove they were willing to change. Apologies were easy. Change was the hard part. After my parents left that day, I didn't feel relieved. Nothing felt truly resolved. They admitted their mistakes, they apologized, but I had heard apologies before. It was their actions that had always told a different story, and this time, I wasn't interested in words. I wanted proof. For the first time in my life, I didn't go out of my way to be the one reaching out first. I didn't send them good morning messages or life updates. I also didn't check in to see if they needed assistance. For once, I allowed them to make the effort. Initially, there was no response. Days turned into weeks, and I thought that was all the confirmation I needed. If I wasn't making the effort, there was no effort at all from them. I knew I should have expected this, yet it still hurt. It wasn't until the third week that things started to change. A random Tuesday brought a call from my mom, which I let go to voicemail, followed by a text. Hey, sweetheart, just thinking about you. Hope you're doing okay, she wrote. A part of me wanted to ignore it to maintain the distance, but another part hesitated, craving any sign that they actually cared. I didn't respond right away. The following day, my dad reached out as well. Miss you, kid. Let's get dinner sometime. I looked at the message, emotions swirling inside me. Not because I was ready to let them back in, but because they were finally trying. I accepted the dinner invitation, not because all was forgiven or because I was ready to act like nothing happened, but because I needed to see if they were serious. We met at a quiet restaurant, just the three of us. Jake wasn't there, and that alone indicated to me they had been paying attention. We sat down, and for the first time in years, my parents inquired about me, not about Jake, not about work, or whether I could help them with something, just about me. I couldn't tell if it was genuine or if they were merely attempting to fix what was broken, but for the first time, they were sincerely listening, and that was new. Halfway through dinner, my mom cleared her throat. "We've been thinking a lot about what you said," she explained thoughtfully, "about how we've treated you." I took a sip of my water, choosing to remain silent. She continued, "We've realized we've always assumed you didn't need us like Jake did, that because you were strong and independent, we didn't have to make an effort." Meeting her gaze, I observed her swallow nervously. "And now we know that was wrong," she confessed. I glanced at my dad, who nodded in agreement. "We see it now, Alyssa." "We do." I didn't know what to say, because those were the words I'd longed to hear my entire life, yet part of me still didn't completely trust them. By the meal's conclusion, something had shifted, not in a dramatic, everything is fixed way, but in a maybe this time they actually mean it way. They had a long journey ahead, but for once they were taking the first steps, and for now, that was enough. Words, however, were still just words, and if they were truly committed to fixing things, they needed to prove it. Dinner went better than expected, yet I wasn't naive. I was aware that a single meal and conversation couldn't undo years of being an afterthought. I wasn't seeking a quick fix or another empty apology. If my parents genuinely wanted to change, they had to prove it. The first real test came a week later. It was my birthday. Past experience taught me that birthdays in our family were never balanced. Jake's birthdays were a significant event, celebrated with parties, gifts, and reservations at fancy restaurants of his choosing. Mine were a card, maybe a phone call, if they remembered. I reminded myself not to expect anything this year, not to care, yet waking up that morning, a tiny part of me, the part that still hoped they could change, held on to hope. This time, they didn't overlook it. At exactly 10 a.m., I heard a knock on my door. Frowning, I set down my coffee, wondering who it could be. Upon opening the door, I found my mom and dad standing there holding a cake. My breath hitched. They had never done this before. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," my mom greeted, offering a cautious smile. I blinked, taken aback. "You remembered," I said in disbelief. My dad let out a gentle chuckle. "Of course we did." And for once, I believed them. They didn't just drop off the cake and leave. They spent the day with me. We didn't engage in any grand celebration. It was simply a quiet afternoon at my place, talking, catching up, and enjoying cake that was a tad too sweet, but still perfect. A few months back, Alyssa experienced a shift that altered her perspective on family. There were no hurried farewells, no sense of being merely an obligation. Something felt different this time. They genuinely wanted to be present, and it was a revelation Alyssa hadn't expected. Just weeks later, the change became evident again when she faced a significant work presentation. It was something she'd only vaguely mentioned over dinner, not expecting any reaction. But on the day of the presentation, messages from her parents surprised her. Her mom sent a simple, "Thinking of you today, you'll do great," and her dad reached out with, "Proud of you, kiddo, no matter what." Alyssa realized how impactful such small gestures were. The relationship wasn't without its bumps. Her mom occasionally made excuses for Jake, and her dad struggled to express himself with more than a few words, yet they were trying. They were catching themselves when old habits crept in and were making efforts to improve, which mattered more than Alyssa had anticipated. One night, her mom called just to chat. In their conversation, her mom admitted it would take time for Alyssa to trust them again. "We're not giving up, Alyssa," she assured her daughter, emphasizing how important she was to them. For the first time, Alyssa believed this. She noticed that change is gradual and awkward sometimes, filled with moments of doubt, but her parents persisted. As months rolled on, the changes became clearer. Sitting on her back porch one evening, she received a nonchalant text from her mom asking about her week, warm feelings settling in her chest at the newfound normalcy. Her family even surprised her with their interest in her upcoming solo trip to Italy, an endeavor she decided on without much input from them. But when her dad asked about it at dinner, there was a surprising eagerness to be involved without expecting anything in return. Before she left for Italy, a text from Jake reminded Alyssa of the deep familial bond. Though her mom fretted, Jake acknowledged her for living life on her terms, even labeling it badass. As Alyssa stepped onto Italian soil, she reflected on how long she had been waiting for her parents' recognition. No longer was she vying for their approval. Building her own life had inadvertently taught them how to appreciate her. A few days into her stay, a group message arrived with admiration for her Rome adventures, filled with genuine sentiment. There it was. Her parents meant what they said, and that was enough for Alyssa. One shouldn't have to plead for love or battle for inclusion. When those closest don't recognize your value, choosing yourself may inspire them to finally notice.